explore further to today's panel discussion focusing on water resilience. If I may, I would like to introduce how the panel will be conducted. We will have 4 panelists who are very well acknowledged in their field of expertise. Each of these panelists will present around 5 minutes on their thoughts, and hopefully their thoughts are quite provoking for all of us. They are from academia, civil society, government, and private sector representatives. And then we will make space for the voices from the grassroots, a couple of fishermen in the challenging environment in North Jakarta through a short video, which will be introduced shortly afterwards. The panelists will first be invited to respond to the video, and then we will follow by discussion by every one of you who participate today's winner panel discussion. So without further ado, may I now firstly invite one of the representatives from academia and civil society, Dr. Dian Afriani. So Dr. Dian Afriani is the co-founder and the current senior researcher of Lokahita, the Research Center for Ecology and Geospatial. She's a very young and passionate scientist and also practitioner in the field of disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation. And she actively supports local government to internalize and mainstream environment carrying capacity, disaster risk reduction, and climate change through different and strategic environmental assessment. So let's now hear from Ibu Dian.
Thank you, Irina, for nice introduction. I will share the screen first. Okay, thanks for nice introduction, Irina, and having me here to share some thought. Good afternoon to panelists and participants. In this event, allow me to share how to reframe urban green spaces planning for flood protection using socio-ecological resilience. Why focus on flood protection? Because floods are among the global extreme weather catastrophe, and its trend, as we can see here, are increasing. So, talking about socio-ecological resilience, conceptually, it's originate in system ecology when Holling challenged the fundamental assumption of stability and therefore predictability as the primary characteristic of ecosystems and their management. The first important shift was human and natural systems are conceptualized as interdependent systems and defined as one system. Social here is used as a general term that includes social, cultural, and economic systems. This shift gave priority to more adaptive modes of governance and attention to dynamic interaction between human and nature. One of the tools provided by SHARE is Ecosystem Services Framework, which we use to reframe urban green spaces planning for flood protection. Provision of urban ecosystem services are often influenced by socially constructed value of people with social, cultural, economic privilege. This condition emphasizes the need to understand the dynamic of socio-ecological systems in urban landscape planning. Since the 20th century, determining the size and location of urban green space has followed the minimum allocation standard. However, researchers argue that many local governments have failed to apply this standard because of development pressure which increase conversion of urban green spaces. Comparing to the standard approach, we advance the ES framework to examine the equitable distribution and resilient supply of flood protection in Bandung City. Spatial analysis on supply and demand of flood protection was based on watershed area. We use land cover-based method to illustrate supply and the IPCC risk framework to illustrate demand, which indicates number of vulnerable people affected by floods. This framework could facilitate decision-making in locating urban green spaces that need to be improved or provided based on the quality and demand of ecosystem services. The results suggest that the equitable distribution and resilient supply of flood protection have not been adequately considered in Bandung City. The disproportional allocation of green spaces that offer flood protection has led to inequitable distribution that affect the people who need it most. However, when there is no option to provide green spaces, measure on flood adaptation through improvement of water retention, drainage, sewage, and also building codes in flood-prone areas could leverage the co-benefit of green spaces provision. This effort is in line with resilient characteristics as such redundancy and diversity. So using ecological resilience as a tool, we could identify the driver of challenge and use them to formulate recommendation for solution intervention. In urban landscape, co-benefit between mitigation and adaptation is highly recommended in reducing future flood risk. However, to propose specific measure, we need a set of data such as flood risk map, land subsidence, climate projection at local level. So for further research, there is an opportunity to advance ES framework in reframing urban green space planning, not only for flood protection, but for various benefit of urban ecosystem. Recommended policy and further research here are open the opportunity for inclusive cooperation between Indonesia and Netherlands in order to improve adaptive governance. Thank you. That's all from me. Irina, maybe we can elaborate later in the discussion session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dian. This is a great introduction on the importance of this holistic approach to socio-ecological resilience. Our next speaker is Dr. Djoko Triharyanto, ecological economist at the Agency for Fiscal Policy at the Ministry of Finance. And from this presentation, he will look into what the government is doing also in terms of the economical and fiscal approaches is doing to support this approach. Djoko, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Watt. I will share my screen first. And a bit different with Ibu Dian, I will is already done. So we're talking about the policy formulation, and so I put a very provocative. Hopefully, I put a very provocative title: "Good News from Indonesia." So what the government is already done, specific from the financing side, and I will start from the environmental performance, particularly from the Indonesian side. Like Ibu Menteri is already previous mentioned, we set our double ambitious target, through the SDG and also NDC in 2030. From the NDC target, we set reducing GHG emission until 29%, business as usual, means through the domestic mechanism, financial mechanism, and if the government support from the international aid, we can increase until 41%. And currently, actually, we are on the transition period from the optimizing government budget. We transform to the optimizing market mechanism, or we call it creating a very innovative financial scheme. And from the Internal Ministry of Finance, actually, we already have a very very best practices, and also several good lessons learned from the innovative financial scheme, such as we issued what we call domestic regular sukuk since 2030, and then 2018 we followed to issue global green sukuk 2018, 19, and continue last year actually during pandemic year. And then from the global green sukuk, we also diversify and creating another scheme, particularly when we're focusing on the a very potential domestic market, when we issued what we call domestic green sukuk retail. This Rusuko retail mechanism, particularly focusing on the individual person. And currently, in 2020, 21, we are still on the final preparation to issue SDG bond. So this is quite interesting if Netherlands government would also support from the Ministry of Finance, because from those kind of modality, if we reverse from the climate new climate institute data, they put us from the medium classified. If we talk about the climate change performance index, yeah. So this is quite interesting for us, because if we compare with another country like Australia, like the European country, the Indonesian ranking is quite impressive. And this is consistent also if we talk about the bond spectator, yeah, like Ibu Menteri also mentioned before. If we compare from vivid economy data, February last year until February this year, Indonesia also making a good progress. If we talk about the positive contribution compared with the negative contribution, and also the final result of the green stimulus index. So from this quite impressive progress, we foster, yeah, particularly we foster from the planning and financing budgeting also. From the planning side, we put the first time, yeah, we put directly sustainability and also environmental protection to the national priority. If you looking from the medium terms national government planning, you can see directly terms of environmental protection and sustainability. And this is also linking with the regional planning document, because last year actually we have a big event, direct election, almost 280 regional governments. So you can imagine if we can transform their regional planning document, submit it with the sustainable issue and also climate change agenda. And from the financial aspect, actually, we are also trying to improve what we call public transparency and also public accountability through the very innovative tools, yeah. Because since 2016, actually, we implement what we call climate mitigation budgeting. And 2018, we add climate adaptation budgeting. And since last year, actually, we picked and also piloting on the several regional government, we started to implement regional climate budgeting. So this is quite interesting also. And the last slide, I will put another milestone for us from the Indonesian government. Yeah, I put green achievement because we already established a PPDLH. PPDLH is an Environmental Indonesian Trust Fund. And then we also, actually last month, Indonesia selected from the Climate Coalition Finance Minister and then the Helsinki Principle. Yeah. So Indonesia will co-chair, selected as a co-chair together with Finland government for the Climate Coalition Finance Minister. And internal from the Ministry of Finance, we are established NDA GCF, NDA Secretariat, and already started to deliver so many financial support from many stakeholders. And also currently, we are on the preparation final to develop what we call PLU. PLU means Public Service Agency, talking about disaster management fund. So this is quite interesting. And in 2015, we also have a best practice lesson learned when we started to implement agriculture insurance, crop insurance, operated by Jasindo and also under the Ministry of Agriculture, still focusing on the paddy rice insurance, and also establishment of a fisherman insurance operated by the Ministry of Fisheries. And the last one talking about the implementation of ecological fiscal transfer. This is quite provocative also if we talk about the ecological fiscal transfer, because we can divide it multi-level ecological discussion. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Ruat. Yeah, thank you. This is my final slide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Irina, our next speaker.
Okay. I'm just captivated with two previous panelists. It's so enriching. I mean, from the framework perspective of the SES or social ecological resilience framework, and then go to the governance of climate risk through financial intervention. That is quite impressive. So I'm also captivated with the two previous talk. Now, shall we continue to the next speaker or panelist? We have Ibu Anissa Triyanti. She's the representative from academia. She will share a bit about the solutions-based framework. She's a postdoctoral researcher on the water and climate governance and a lecturer at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development, Utrecht University. She has been diligently a global advocate with more than 5 years of experiences, including with the United Nations intergovernmental processes, and she's also the co-founder of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, or UNMGCY. She was appointed as the Young Scientist Representative for the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Global Science and Technology Advisory Group, or STAG. So Anissa, my dear friend, the floor is yours now for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mbak Irina. I will try to share my screen first. I hope you all can see it. Can you see my screen? Yes. Let me put it in the... Yeah, okay. Selamat siang, goedemorgen, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yeah, I would like to share some kind of helicopter view from my 8 years of research, doing study in the topic of climate governance and also disaster risk governance. We all know that climate change is a typical Anthropocene problem. Human actions become the center of a system change. And despite our effort to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees, we are also still continuously experiencing climate change impact, including sea level rise and disasters. I think maybe some of you have read also this new study just published by Robert Nichols and other colleagues in Nature Journal, mentioning that people living in a subsided area experiencing average relative sea level rise up to 4 times higher. And this is very much the case also for Jakarta and millions of people living in the coastal area of Indonesia and of course also the Netherlands. So our ecosystem and also people's well-being are very much threatened by climate impact. There is no other way than to adapt and also to mitigate at the same time. So we all also know that climate change is a wicked problem. It's very complex, very systemic, and we often cannot identify what are the single cause or also root causes of the problem. So the uncertainty here is very high, and we don't know how much mitigation or adaptation is enough. And climate change is also very much a governance problem. So challenges include multi-level actors, diverse worldviews about the problem and also the solution, and the problem of fragmentation of knowledge, institution, and instruments. And climate change is also very much a political issue. So because it is very systemic and complex, we need an adequate inter and also transdisciplinary knowledge input to understand the boundary conditions for climate change adaptation. This is the core of the solutions-based concept that we at Water Climate Future Deltas Hub at Utrecht University are now exploring. So we need to look into different building blocks and interconnectedness between them, including the biophysical, socioeconomic governance and law. And we also need to consider the historical context, the current state and the future scenario. So only by doing that, we can demarcate a possible adaptation solution. And we also have to ensure that these measures, whether it is nature-based or hard infrastructure or combination, are feasible and also appropriate. So when we planning and implementing our efforts, we also have to avoid maladaptation. So how can we do that? I wanted to share some insights from my 8 years research evaluating governance responses to climate change with ecosystem-based adaptation. And these projects that I studied are mostly initiated by country partnerships. So one of which is also the project of Building with Nature, which is the partnership of Indonesia and the Netherlands in the MAP. And I found that maladaptation happens when we are too much focusing on innovative or technological aspects without full support of non-technological capacity. And also the risk of maladaptation is increased if certain measure does not fit for purpose or contextualize, and if there is a lack of inclusion or adverse inclusion, or if there is no norms that guide us to select this adaptation plan. So what are the lessons learned? So to effectively adapt to climate change, we of course need partnership, right? That's what SDG 17 told us. So our partnership is very much valuable between Indonesia and the Netherlands. It is a very nice title of this event, Journey of Hope, but I think Journey of Hope should be journey towards societal transformation. So we have to aim at the impact and also focus on societal transformation. And perhaps we need to go back again to discuss and selecting our normative principles as yardsticks. So do we want to implement measures just because it is feasible and economically beneficial, or also because we want to achieve common goal like sustainability or social justice? So in any cooperation, I think meaningful inclusion is very important. So both sides have to respect each other, of course, and learn from each other. But the learning here, I think, should be multidirectional. So it should be reciprocal. So not only how Indonesia can learn from the Netherlands, but also how the Netherlands and international community can learn from the case of Indonesia, at least to formulate future research education agenda or policy agenda. And lastly, I think the nature-based solution approach is really our opportunity. How can we live in nature? We are now very much understand the service of nature can give us, especially in this COVID-19 situation. So projects like conservation, restoration of wetlands, for example, could help us to deposit sediment and also reduce land subsidence impact. And I think the Netherlands is very good at this type of innovation. But what we often forget is that we, human, is actually the integral part of the ecosystem or nature. So we have to revisit again, I think, our role in protecting nature and also build human capacity and reduce vulnerability. And lastly, I just wanted to echo what everyone has said, that the youth role is very important, the young professional, the alumni. I'm also alumni of the Netherlands. And I learned a lot from this country's expertise, but now it is the time to contextualize our knowledge to the case of Indonesia, and I'm looking forward to hearing innovative ideas, and also for this panel, looking forward to our interactive discussion. Thank you very much. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Dr. Anissa. This is a wonderful contribution in which you not only bring in the well-known notion of the Anthropocene, of course, but also the importance of worldviews and your very concrete remarks about the title. We can get back to that in the discussion a little bit later. But first, I want to give the floor to Mr. Pieter Letitre, an experienced international project manager and strategic advisor for integrated water management, who has worked for 35 years in more than 20 countries and the last 5 years in Indonesia also. And I assume he would be there if it hadn't been for COVID-19. So at least for now, Mr. Letitre, you're there virtually again, and we give you the floor.
Selamat siang, good afternoon to all, and thanks for this opportunity to share a few thoughts from the perspective of the private sector on climate adaptation. I'm working for Deltares, which is a knowledge institute. We are considered a private sector party, but actually we are a not-for-profit party that operates indeed as a private partner in a private party in Indonesia. I would like to share some lessons learned on climate adaptation work in Indonesia from the last 5 years and from my colleagues before. And focus on a few things that helped and also a few obstacles that we have been faced with in climate adaptation work. To give you an idea of what we have been involved as Deltares, we have been involved already for around 30 years on water management projects in Indonesia, starting with big river basin studies in the 80s and 90s, and from 2007 onwards on the big flooding issues in Jakarta. But that expanded also to other projects like the DEMAC, Building with Nature project, and later to the NCICD project, where I have been personally involved with, especially to look on the knowledge management aspects, the data and information issues, and specific issues such as the mitigation of land subsidence. What I see as a very important helping factor or to work effectively as a party in Indonesia is indeed the large extensive network of alumni that studied in the Netherlands. It makes such an enormous, it is such an enormous advantage to have, as was mentioned, 20,000 people that are aware on what is the Netherlands, the complexities of issues, modern innovative approaches and technologies and tools. So it makes much easier to make new partnerships with people and institutions in Indonesia that are familiar to the situation and that technology in the Netherlands. Another aspect which I think for business-to-business cooperation, of course, we have to distinguish between the big construction companies such as Van Noord, which we already have seen here, but also the consultancy firms and the knowledge institutions such as Deltares. I think business-to-business cooperation could not have been as effective without also the knowledge-to-knowledge cooperation. And to that respect, a very important project that we have been involved with for the last 10, 12 years is the joint cooperation project between Netherlands knowledge institutes such as ITC, Wageningen, the KNMI, the Dutch Meteorological Institute, Deltares, and Wageningen University, and with its counterparts in Indonesia, such as BMKG, BIG, LAPAN, PUS-AIR, BPPT, etc. So this knowledge-to-knowledge cooperation has been very instrumental in indeed creating the knowledge and to better understand climate change, but also understand ways to adapt to climate change. And I think the DEMAC, Building with Nature project, where the big EcoShape consortium was involved in, is a very concrete example of how important business, knowledge, academia, and also the local people through local NGOs have to work together to really understand the system and also see the complexities, because what was said by my predecessors, my former speakers, climate change adaptation is really a very complex issue. It requires technical issues, but also governance and social inclusion, and that can only be brought in by broad partnerships with people that really understand local conditions. A few obstacles to finalize. If we really see the long trajectory from ideas to development of strategies and conceptual approaches to practice, we see that it is a very long road, and sometimes the implementation is not coming as fast as we would hoped. And that is because the complexities of decision-making. Decision-making requires consensus in Indonesia. And that means that, parties have to agree with each other. And that requires also good sectoral coordination and cooperation, which sometimes is a challenge. And for the rest, we see that it is very important that knowledge needs to be further developed at different levels, at local level, but also at the national level, at the provincial level. So knowledge cooperation remains important. And that is sometimes also complex because knowledge institutions cannot always participate in external finance projects. So that's why the accumulation of knowledge within companies and knowledge institutes is sometimes hampered by the fact that people cannot be involved for longer term on the same subject. Well, these are some of my considerations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the national teacher, for these very smart remarks and important issues. And I think the issue of the financial consequences will immediately be taken to heart by Joko, who will, with his colleagues, look into those kind of obstacles. What I like specifically is how you, on the one hand, say that this multi-stakeholder approach means that within Indonesia and within the Netherlands, we have to cooperate with the private sector, with academia, with government and local communities, but also between the two countries, knowledge to knowledge and business to business. And together that makes a very strong network of all the partners necessary to make this implementation faster. Maybe when we start the conversation with the four panelists, I can ask you for brief responses on this one question. What did you hear in the various contributions that makes this truly a journey of hope? I mean, it's very simple to make it into a journey of despair, speaking about the future and furthering climate change. But what did you hear that makes it a journey of hope? What is hopeful in the conversation so far? If you can just give us a very brief remark for this further conversation. Dr. Dian, maybe first, what did you hear as a journey of hope?
Okay, thank you, Ruart. So I think we can see hope in the horizon. At the national level, government Indonesia has already have a policy on climate adaptation and mitigation. Among other things, there are NDC, National Determined Contribution for Indonesia, and there is already also NDC for adaptation, and also low emission development strategy. And the most important things that I would also to address is about how to build to implement those national policy at local level. There is quite a challenge, but also there is a hope because there is a program on budget tagging, green budget tagging that initiated by Pak Joko here. There is also progress in local level.
Okay.
But to build relation of trust between various actors, I think we need to enable symmetric information between actors that would help in building relation of trust. And therefore, the policy implementation of One Data Indonesia is crucial. It could
it's not only hope, but hope is also built by trust and bridging the national and the local level. I keep it a little bit short because we have more speakers and lots to discuss still. Ibu Anissa, what you already spoke about societal transformation as the concrete version of hope.
Yeah, I think we can just see from our day-to-day experience during COVID-19, you see how adaptive humans are. We thought that we're gonna break down and lay flat on our face, but actually we're trying our best to overcome this together, right? This is a hope. And I also see, like, we all see the commitments starting from global to regional to national and local level, that they are really willing to take actions to achieve Paris Agreement, SDGs, and their framework, and also leadership from our young people. So from the young,
there,
yes. And I started teaching also this period, and I see our students, despite this crisis, are still very much willing to study about sustainability and really wanted to learn about how they can tackle future problems, including climate change, disaster risk. Yeah, that's my quick answer.
Thank you. That's a wonderful answer indeed. Pak Joko, you already spoke about the good news, which I think is a synonym maybe of the hope. Can you say a little bit about how this includes also the cooperation with these local communities?
Yeah, in our perspective, hope is our ultimate weapon. Yeah, so hope is we keep our belief that we can do better for the better future, to change better future for our next generation. But hope is required collaborative action among multi-stakeholder, and the final the ultimate idea is hope required the government reform to build the multi-stakeholder trust. That's my opinion, Ruat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Latifa, after 35 years in advising in water management and so on, has your hope increased over the years or has it decreased?
It has increased, and as also working after 5 years in Indonesia, I see that knowledge is really increasing. I think we have developed for the last 10-12 years through this joint cooperation project an enormous amount of new tools and information, better understanding on climate change. And what we also see that because of this cooperation, the knowledge institutes in Indonesia are also working more closely together and are also sharing their tools and information. So that is a real good sign that multi-stakeholder cooperation and knowledge cooperation is improving. I also very much like the DUTER projects. So the projects that really engage the involvement and the young ideas of young people that are working at in this case the province of Jakarta and the city of Rotterdam. And I also see that city of Jakarta very much stimulates also this kind of cooperation, and that the people that have studied in the Netherlands really are challenged to apply their knowledge in Jakarta. So that is also a real sign of hope for me, yes.
So not just faraway ideas, but you see very concrete examples of hope. That's nice to see that. Some of you have already mentioned the importance of connecting to the local community, and that's why we also want to bring in the voices and the perspective of people on the local level, on the grassroots level, in a small video.
Bau anyir di Gang Kerang, Muara Angke, Jakarta Utara menyeruak dari setiap penjuru. Nelayan di kampung ini sok kerang hijau untuk dijual di pasar ikan Kamal Muara di pesisir Jakarta. Mereka juga biasa membawa pulang berbagai jenis ikan untuk kemudian dijajakan di sana. Tapi memanen ikan kian sulit sejak proyek reklamasi Teluk Jakarta berjalan 2013 lalu.
Saya nelayan tradisional itu perahunya sebesar 10 GT ke bawah. Karena nelayan kecil itu tidak bisa untuk ke tengah. Perahunya pun tidak besar gelombangnya karena harus dilawannya juga dengan perahu-perahu besar kalau yang di tengah itu. Ikan-ikan yang kami tangkap itu suka ada, suka nggak ada. Jadi kesukaan kebanyakannya sering tidak datang daripada datangnya. Karena menunggu air bersih, air jernih kembali. Apabila air jernih kembali, maka ikan berdatangan kembali.
Kampung-kampung nelayan di balik pulau buatan terjebak dalam belenggu kerusakan lingkungan yang mengancam tempat tinggal dan mata pencaharian mereka. Ekosistem pesisir rusak, diganti gundukan tanah. Banjir rob pun semakin sering merendam pemukiman mereka.
Kalau untuk komunikasi selama ini belum pernah pengembang untuk sosialisasi ke masyarakat yang kena dampak ya. Nggak tahu kalau masyarakat yang hanya atas nama masyarakat untuk mewakili masyarakat. Mungkin ada oknum begitu, mungkin bisa ada. Jadi untuk yang kena dampak kayaknya nggak ada untuk sosialisasi.
Thank you very much for the video. I think it's very inspiring to pick up from what Anissa had mentioned about the multi-directional learning processes. And it is very, very imperative and important to incorporate communities' worldview as well in our discussion. And if we observe closely to the video that was just being played, there is Pak Khalil Charlim, traditional fisherman, and also Pak Iwan Charmidi, chair of traditional fishermen community in Muara Angke, North Jakarta. They said the stream to fight against is so strong. Probably that also a metaphoric meaning of how they continue the struggle daily on daily basis. And this seems to be still quite a huge gap. And I would rather ask perhaps to Pak Joko and also to Peter Letitre, how do you respond to this gap of the need for clean water? The fishermen still felt underrepresented, misrepresented. How do you make into a more concrete kind of action at the local level to make changes of what Pak Khalil and Pak Iwan had shared in the video? Anyone could go first, either Pak Joko or Peter.
Or Pak Peter first, because some distortion music, I think my background. So Pak Peter, you can ask first. You can answer first.
Pak Peter.
This is really a very important aspect, the involvement of stakeholders in big infrastructural projects and developments such as ongoing in Jakarta. And I must say that the NCICD project, where I have been involved with many other parties, Indonesian institutes, but also Korean and Netherlands companies, is really an example where we learned that social inclusion and stakeholder participation is a crucial issue. And when you really talk with the stakeholders and the people and the fishermen, you will understand that sometimes they understand why certain measures are necessary. But while listening to them, you could apply their insights and knowledge to make the impacts on their work much less than it would be if they would not have been consulted. For example, when building dikes along the coast in Jakarta, which is of course a necessary measure because the northern part of Jakarta is several meters below sea level, so it needs to be protected by dikes or other measures. But by making simple adaptations to these dikes, for example, by creating places where the fishing boats can be parked effectively, or where people can look and climb up the walls and reach their boats. These are already measures that would make the exception of this kind of measures much better for the people. So that is why people need to be involved.
The experience of Pak Iwan Karmidi when he said that the communication was lacking. Does that ring true to you? Does it happen often?
Of course, in a very big city such as Jakarta, it is not always easy to engage all stakeholders. But for the big plans, it is of course possible to invite fishing communities and the representatives from the fishing communities. But that sometimes is the task of the ministries or the province of Jakarta. And it cannot always be enforced. And the cooperation between the province and the city of Jakarta and the national ministries sometimes requires also that one of the parties is really stimulated to think of stakeholder engagement.
Thank you very much, Pak Peter. Yes, indeed, it's a huge challenge to ensure that all voices are represented fairly and in justice. Pak Joko, please share your very brief comments on this. There's still a huge gap here.
In my personal opinion, so we could see that we have two basic problem The first problem is regarding on the engagement process, and the second problem related with the support and also communication lagging. So better if we can reducing this lagging both from the engagement and also communication through increase the communication first with the fisherman community, represent fisherman community, and then we can increase the participation also from the local government, because under the Jakarta province. And if we consider like what I already present, actually we can reinforce through the Minister of Fisheries, because they already have a BLU. Yeah, BLU. The fishermen community can also access the BLU services, and then they can also link with what we call a fisherman insurance, perhaps. So the challenge is how to reduce the communication lagging and also the engagement lagging. And this is the opportunity from the multi-stakeholder participation, I think.
Yeah, Robert, do you have further, points of views regarding to these issues?
Well, maybe following up on the point that was made by Peter Letitra on implementation, the long time that it takes from ideas to concrete action and all the levels involved. I was wondering, especially also to Dr. Dia and Dr. Anissa, when you speak about this social ecological resilience, what can we do to speed up implementation and make concrete actions rather than having it last for many, many years, which we simply cannot afford? How can we speed up implementation of change?
Yeah. Okay. From the concept of socio-ecological resilience, that it's clear that we need to investigate the interaction between human and nature. Human and nature become one system, but also in human system there is also interaction between different actors. But what from my experience, sometimes we are from scientists or maybe government. When we come to the local community, sometimes we use the language that couldn't understand by them, the hard language, the scientific language, or the bureaucrat language. We need to start to use the easy language that understood by them, and also touch the impact of what we're gonna develop, like program and so on, to their livelihood. So if they understand, maybe we can also collaborate with them and also facilitate the local community to find alternative livelihood if their livelihood is taken by the adaptation project, that the benefit is bigger than their livelihood there. So I think we need to start to using easy language that they can understand, and also facilitate them to find alternative livelihood. I think it's like that.
Thank you very much, Diane. I think it's very crucial to probably transform the way we communicate, as mentioned by Pak Joko. The engagement processes are much more, it's a longer process. It's not a one-time, one project kind of process. And I think we take note on that very, very dearly. I noted that there is a hand raised by one of our audience here, Ibu Susan Kiara. Would you step up and speak your question, please? Please be invited. Mbak Susan, are you still there? No, maybe not. Maybe not at the moment. My probably following question would be, okay. So there's a question there. Oh, Ibu Susan Kiara cannot turn on the audio. So please could Mas Dito or Mbak Inti activate the audio of Mbak Susan? Before that,
otherwise maybe we can type the question because for time reasons we already have video.
Yes.
Ibu Susan?
Hi. So I'm here actually with Pak Khalil. He's coming from North Jakarta. So I think I would like to give a brief response on the situation actually. Nowadays, because of the adaptation project, they really become more burden to put their boat. So I think in terms of development, actually maybe the development itself supposed to be ensure that the fisher folk still able to access their waters. Actually, nowadays, in terms of climate crisis after the project was happening, there is a really massive flooding in this December and January. And then we do believe that the climate crisis under this big project will be continuing in the next year. So the question is, if we are now talking about the development, actually the basic question that we need to raise, it's about what kind of development itself that human need today. It's really important because as the result of to answer the adaptation issues, we still believe, Pak Khalil still believe that 17 artificial island is not the answer. What you have to think, it's about, you discuss about water, land subsidence and so on. You have to think about it more further, but by building the 17 artificial island, I think that's not the best solution. If we talk more about it, you cannot keep continuing to planting mangrove every years, but at the same time, there is a lot of mangrove coverage decreasing because of extractive and exploitative project in a lot of area in Indonesia. And then you have to remember that the reclamation project is not only in Jakarta. There are 41 reclamation projects in Indonesia, which is took a lot of sand in our waters, in our ocean. So if we talk about a climate crisis, the thing it's just not to ensure these people are going to be involved in the discussion, but how we are going to ensure that their basic right, their constitutional right, it's will be provided by government and also by another actors. And I think I just want, yeah,
for time reasons, really short, please.
We need to commitment to stop the exploitation in our ocean and stop evicting people from their livelihood. I think that's the message. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ibu Susan. And terima kasih juga untuk Pak Khalil Charlim. Very important to hear his story and the concreteness of the topic. And I think it underscores what we have been hearing, the importance of working together, also of taking seriously the technological aspects, but also the economic and the local, and perhaps also the cultural meanings of the situation and the concrete context. Irina, we are already running towards a close. We have a few minutes, and given that everybody is very busy, of course, I think we have to honor the time reasons. For the last reflections, Irina, what is the most important things that you bring from this conversation?
Yes, I think in all of our efforts, we do have an enormous goodwill in our hand, in our mind, in our energy. But I think we also need to appreciate the complexity behind, and that whatever we are intervening, it always have or it always resonate with following consequences to other societies, as researchers, as private sectors, as academia, as government. And we also have always the power and ability, if we are very, very hopeful, to be involved in this transformation process. So this refurbished kind of approach and in the communication process, again, has been mentioned, is a very good way indeed to continue. And it's a long journey. We understand it's not a shortcut. There's no shortcut. But also, Roard, I would like to also thank to all of the participants who actually post their comments and also their questions that are already being answered. And they are very indeed very much important information and questions. But further on, if you still have more questions to the panelists, I think the panelists agree as well to share their email if you'd like.
Yes, those we will also disclose. I think for me the most, well, I think there's a sobering contribution by Ibu Susan and Pak Khalil and Pak Iwan. Tells us that even with all our good intentions, we have to really make sure that we hear the voices of the people who are most directly involved and most vulnerable in this case. I also heard about the urgency that we feel and also the hope and the lessons learned that are there. I like the idea of building with nature, which I think is a very strong concept, and especially also building with people, I think is an important one for both for academics and for people in governance and in technology to remember that it's always about people. And for this holistic view of social ecological resilience and the normative principles that were mentioned, values like justice and care and empowerment, I think those are maybe also a next step in building forward, or maybe to put it differently, to change the narrative. Because what we need is a narrative of hope, is a journey of hope, is a story of a world we can envision, in which indeed we take seriously what happens to people on the ground, how they experience what we're doing, and that also translates into the technological solutions that we will also really need for adapting and mitigating the situation. So yes, a huge thanks to our four panelists, to Peter Letitre, to Dian Afriani, to Agnisa Trianti, and to Joko Tri Haryanto. Your contributions were very welcome and important. Our academic leads, Philip Ward and Pajan Sopaheluwakan, who contributed to organizing all this. The staff from NUFIC, who played a major role in this. The high-level guests that we already thanked before, the two ambassadors, Mr. Feins and Mr. Mayervas, the two ministers, Ibu Siti and Ibu van Nieuwenhuizen, Mr. Marcel Beukenboom and Dr. Ruanda Agung Sugadiman. Thanks to all of them. Thanks for all of you who have been participating and listening. You will find all the information on winner.or.id. You will find a survey that pops up on your screen. Please help us to fill that in and rate so that we can also use your feedback on that. There's also a reminder here for the winner alumni challenge. 10th of April is the deadline. Don't forget to send in your best ideas and to build this network that also Peter Letitre was pointing to. The importance of alumni, the importance of young people, the importance of the new generation to meet the climate change challenge. Irina, it was a pleasure to work with you on this webinar, and thank you to all of you.
Likewise, Roard. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Ruad. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.